Hello, I'm Lucy from Bookshanks, and today I am back to review the last two books on the Women's Prize longlist. So I think it's karma that after reading all the Booker Prize longlist and everyone saying I got the duff half, I have clearly got the good half of the draw this time round. I'm back with two more books that I really enjoyed. First I've got An American Marriage by Tayari Jones, and I'm also going to talk about Swan Song by Kelleigh Greenberg-Jephcott. Let's talk about this one first because this is the first one I read. Now this book has obviously been huge in America. I mean, it's got a jacket quote from Obama, for God's sake. Not doing bad for herself, really, is she, Ms. Jones? And you know, we're kind of sceptical of jacket quotes on this channel in general. It's a thing, we don't like them, but actually, you know, Obama might have got it right. I really quite like this book. It is the story of a young American couple, a middle class, educated, upwardly mobile black couple who have recently got married. I think they're about 18 months into their marriage, and they're, you know, trundling along relatively happily, not, you know, in sort of Disney bliss, but, you know, getting there, working their way through, when a series of unfortunate coincidences means that the husband, Roy, is arrested for a crime that his wife, Celestial, knows he cannot possibly have committed. She was with him at the time of the crime, but all, you know, sort of the stars align against them, and Roy is thrown into jail for this really brutal, violent crime and is sentenced to 12 years. Now, the narrative then follows us through the first few years of his incarceration, and it flips between Celestial's viewpoint, Roy's viewpoint, and the viewpoint of their closest friend, Andre. And what happens is kind of a little bit inevitable, really. Celestial turns to Andre for comfort, and a relationship begins. The narrative is told through the viewpoints of each of these characters, and also through letters that they send to one another. Primarily Roy and Celestial, but all of the characters, and actually a few of the sort of peripheral characters as well. Letters that they send each other, or they send to Roy in jail. And the letter bit of the book was my favourite bit. It was absolutely fabulous. You get this real insight into the minds of each of the different people in a really believable way, in a really raw way. And I think you're given, a much deeper insight than you perhaps would get in sort of conventional narrative. I really, really loved that bit. It also gives the book tremendous pace when we're in that section as well. You are really dragged forward because they're really, you know, quite short letters, and they cover sort of a really sweeping time period, so years, but in just like a few short paces, and you can see just this gradual disintegration of the relationship through these letters in a really brutal and heartbreaking way, as each says what they think, but also you know that they're really not saying what they think. It's really human, the way in which they lay themselves bare, and all their fragility, and all their sort of hopes and despairs and fears, all in these letters. They sort of swing from like the real extremes of sort of hope to despair, and that for me was the absolute strength of this book. Loved that section. The other thing that I loved about this book was its overarching theme, I guess, actually, really. It's a love story at its heart, but it is ultimately a book about justice. So centrally, we've got this miscarriage of justice. So it does look sort of at a high level, the big questions around sort of justice in society and race relations in America, and how black people have to navigate the obstacles against them. Even when, you know, they've done everything they conceivably could to do, you know, the right thing in life, the thing that's expected of them. It can still go horribly wrong. But it doesn't look at justice in that sense in sort of, you know, a courtroom drama or actually getting into the deep dive politics stuff. It's sort of high level thematic. And I guess it's more about justice in terms of fairness on an everyday scale, because what you've got in this book is just the utter devastation of a marriage and a family as a whole. You know, you've got this sort of tiny nuclear family and the devastation of what might have become of them in terms of children, but also all the wider family and sort of the ripple out and everyone that, you know, one seemingly contained incident can just have this utter devastation. And it looks at fairness in all sorts of different ways. So fairness versus morality. What is your duty in these situations that are so out of the ordinary? What commitments you've made? And, you know, in love, is there such a thing as justice? Can anything ever really be fair? How often truly is everyone really, really satisfied in those situations? And what rights and obligations I guess we have in sort of these really zoomed in parts of life. I loved how it dealt with justice and fairness and morality on all these different levels. Really, really brilliant. Was there anything I didn't love about this book? I guess plot-wise, there were a few times where I was like, that's a bit of a big coincidence, isn't it? I didn't necessarily follow or totally buy in to a few sort of leaps of plot. I think, you know, I had sort of, I say it's not like got that courtroom drama thing about it, but actually I kind of felt it needed just a little more detail about how sort of the procedural bit went that led to this miscarriage of justice, because you've sort of got this crime and then you've got this conviction and there's all this bit in the middle that I went, well, how did it escalate so incredibly severely? And I just wanted a little bit more escalation, a little bit more explanation in terms of that. But that's kind of like a personal taste thing, because I mean, this clearly is not, you know, that type of book. It's a book about people in sort of small scale, zoomed in ways. Not small scale, I mean, you know, it's huge issues, but zooming in on their individual responses and their emotions, I guess, rather than the contexty type of stuff always. So in that sense, actually, you know, it's a real success. It, you know, I do think that it does ultimately achieve what it has set out to do, and it is moving. Barack Obama was right. It is. I liked that a lot. The only other thing that I'd probably say, which I don't even know if is a fair criticism really, but I'm going to say it anyway because, you know, it's why I'm here, is there were an awful lot of cultural references, like American cultural references, that as a UK person kind of went over my head a bit. It didn't bother me most of the time, except when it was sort of in direct relation to them talking about a character or something like that. So likening someone to somebody else in US popular culture that was just completely over my head. And I've seen it described elsewhere that actually those cultural references were a real strength of the book for other people and enhanced it, but they were a little bit lost on me at times. But, you know, overall, those are things that are sort of added bonuses to the sort of, you know, really good core and heart of the novel. And, you know, I just like to pick what I am. So overall, yeah, American Marriage, Tayari Jones, really liked it. Good book. The second book that I am going to talk about is Swan Song by Kelleigh Greenberg-Jephcott. And this was one of the books that I think I was most keen to read on the shortlist, because it is about Truman Capote. And his novel, In Cold Blood, sort of true crime narrative non-fiction novel, was one of the books that first made me fall in love with reading as an adult. It got me so excited, and I've had a bit of a fascination with him ever since. He was well known to be a real eccentric, and I knew a lot about him in sort of relation to his behaviour around writing In Cold Blood, and I knew a little bit about him Falling from Grace, but this book is like the absolute most in-depth deep dive into that very fall from grace. It is told from the differing perspectives of who he called the Swans. So a group of sort of high society women who were his very best friends and his closest confidants for 20 years in real life. I don't know if I made that clear. In real life. Now, what he did over the course of that 20 years was listen and collect all their secrets and all their amazing scandalous stories, and then he wrote them down and started to make them into a novel. A work, as it is, again, of narrative non-fiction. So he was sort of moving from crime non-fiction to high society, gossip, scandal non-fiction. But what he did in 1975 is publish a little bit of it in Esquire magazine, and all hell broke loose because these women who had thought that they were his very best friends, all their secrets were suddenly outed to the world, basically. And quite frankly, understandably, they weren't happy. So this book takes the perspective of each of these women, these swans, and the fallout of what happened, interspersed with sort of the backstory of what was leading up to their relationships that they built with Capote along the way, flashbacks or sort of, they're not really flashbacks because it's not his perspective, but going back to his childhood and looking at his relationship with his mother, which was seriously messed up, and also, you know, his relationship with Harper Lee of To Kill a Mockingbird fame, who was his childhood friend. I mean, goodness me, he had such an interesting life, and it was just crying out to be made into this book. And I mean, goodness, Kelleigh Double Barrel, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, Kelleigh Greenberg-Jephcott. Gonna have to edit that out, that was embarrassing, sorry Kelleigh. My point was, she has done a fantastic job. Oh my goodness, she's done her homework. Every single sentence of this book is just overflowing. It is cram-packed with details about the people, the setting, the context, the history. I mean, there is not a word wasted in this book. It's kind of phenomenal, really. I mean, it's a huge book, but yet you still feel like there is so much crammed into there, so much history and research. My goodness me. I think I read somewhere that she'd taken 10 years to write it, and you can see how, because it comes across as just an absolute labour of love. And I kind of wanted to stop reading it every so often, just to fact check things that come up. I go, oh my goodness, is that real? That can't be real. But you feel like it is, and I'm sure that it would be. And it's kind of impressive. At the same time, when I started reading it though, I kind of felt a bit uncomfortable. I felt a bit dirty because Truman Capote basically outed all these women's secrets, and I find that really awful thing to do and really brutal. And then we're kind of reading about them again, and so that these women are being outed a second time, you know, all their heartbreaks and the things that they did that they really shouldn't have done. And it kind of felt a bit voyeuristic to start with. I was like, I'm not quite sure that if it was unethical the first time round, it's not a little bit unethical the second time round. But the more I read, the less I cared, actually. I just totally was on board with finding out the scandal and the gossip. It was really rather fun. The thing that I think is done really brilliantly in this book is actually the portrayal of Capote himself, because he comes across as just the most complex man. He is a really interesting person to read about, but he's neither, you know, he's not all villain, he's not, you know, all good. He's got all that nuance. So he has the layers of being, you know, really funny and warm and vulnerable and desperate for love and approval, at the same time as just being exceptionally manipulative and you know, really ruthless in what he's setting out to do, and driven and exploitative, and all these different things just rolled into one person who, you know, really I think is one of a kind, and comes across as a person who just, you know, has the absolute extremes of human emotion, and, you know, just every point along the scale he experiences, and it's a real roller coaster to go through them, and you know, a joy to go through them as well, to watch them, and it's really compelling way, I guess, to build a book around just one person's extreme emotions. I enjoyed it a lot. I really did like it. Do I have any criticisms? Perhaps a little teeny tiny bit long, but that's just personal taste. I'm looking up there because I'm like, I don't really have many. I don't. And you know, I think the long list this year it's been a belter. I've really enjoyed it. And do you know what? We're going to do our shortlist predictions on the next video. Couple of days, so keep your eyes peeled for that. In the meantime, I'd love to know what you thought of these novels if you read them. I'd love to know what your shortlist predictions are. Maybe save that for the next video. I don't know, just have a chat to me. I really like chatting. Please do subscribe to our channel if you are new. We'd like to get to know you, and that's pretty much it. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you soon. Bye.